Welcome to Fabric Monday. This week we'll talk about Delta Tables optimization secrets. Some secrets not very well known by Power BI developers and that you need to know when deciding about what architecture to use and how to optimize your performance. Let's talk about theory. What's the theory we are talking about? Data lake and data house are historical repositories. So this means that in theory, nothing ever changed in these repositories. You never would have an update or a delete on these repositories. It's something that should never happen because they are historical. The facts already happened in that way. So, historical repositories are expected to be read-only in relation to transactions. You do not make updates or deletes. You make batches set to insert more historical data. Just that. But that is not the reality. What's the reality? We choose what history we will keep and override the rest. For example, in a star schema we have the fact, we have the dimensions, and most of the times, to avoid an excessive amount of work, we choose what dimensions we will really keep a deep history about them and what dimensions we don't consider so important and we will not keep a deep history about them. If something changes, we just update that. So we choose an architectural approach between using an upset, we receive a record that already exists in the data lake. What we do an upset, we update that record. In this case, we are losing the history. We lose the history making an upset. Or we use a technique which is called slowly changing dimension. It's an instrumentation that in a slowly changed dimension we keep out the history. The new version of the record which arrived becomes a new record. So we keep out the history. It's a choice that we make. And the processing techniques that we use can also result in many updates and deletes on the tables. I already saw scenarios where they were deleting the data every day and reloading it again due to the limitations of the data structure. This is not a perfect scenario, this is not the ideal scenario, but it exists. People make this. What should we know to control this situation, to be in full control of this situation and the optimization of our environment for these situations? Parquet files are read-only. It's critical that we understand that. Parquet files are totally read-only. Delta format introduces log as a workaround. So, what this means? We are not using just Parquet, we are using Delta tables. Delta tables use the Parquet format and introduce a log as a workaround to allow updates, allow deletes and so on, to allow changes and transactions over the Delta table. But it's a workaround. This doesn't change the basic fact, and the basic fact is that the Parquet is read-only. And in this situation, we also face a choice always present in technology. Should we use the technical resources that the technology is giving to us, or should we control our data in a more manual way, in a way that we have a deeper control of what we are doing to our data? What do I mean about this choice? I mean that the logs that the delta table provides create a feature called time travel. We can do time travel and see how one specific record was 2 days ago, 3 days ago, a week ago, and so on. But this means to keep an entire history of every update that happened with that record. And keeping this history can affect the performance. It can. How much it will affect performance is something to be analyzed, but it can. Or another possibility is to not keep this history, not rely on the technical feature, to manage this manually using data modeling on our environment. This is the SCD solution, is slowly changing dimension. We model our dimensions to be slowly changing dimensions. So we need to choose to manage the history manually using what we know about data modeling, or using the technical feature of time travel from delta tables. It's a choice, and according to your choice, you need to know the consequence. That's what we are talking on this Parquet Monday. Let's see an example about delta format and updates on the records in a delta table. We have here a lake house, a simple lake house. In this simple lake house, I work with the fact sales table. We can here take a look on the view files of the fact sales table. This fact sales table is partitioned by year and quarter. So the files are broken down by year and quarter. On each quarter, I have one single file. That's very good. That's very good. Because if you have too many small files, this makes the quiz slower. This is a problem for the Spark environment. It's a problem very well known as small files problem. So bigger the file, the better. We need to find a good balance in relation to the size of the file. What is the full size for the files in the Microsoft Fabric environment? There is a default Spark configuration on the Fabric environment which set the size of the file to 1 gigabyte. So, according to your load of data, if you try to keep 1 gigabyte of data in a single file. Of course, this will not happen always. For example, in this case, we hadn't 1 gigabyte of data here. We had 57 megabytes, and the file is 57 megabytes. So this depends also on the loading process. The loading process can still create the small files problem. We will see an example about this in a moment. Now that we understand the files on this fact sales table on the lake house, let's take a look on this work. The first code block on this workbook is to make a full load of the fact sale table. I will not really execute this. I don't need to execute this because the fact sale table is already there. On the second block, I make an update on the fact sale table. I'm updating the field total including tax multiplying by 2. So I'm updating all the records on the fact sale table. I'm already executing this code block. It's activated. The live pool for the execution was activated in 5 seconds, and let's analyze the result. Now we are seeing the execution time 1 minute and 56 seconds. There are millions of records inside this table, and the updated is complete. Let's see what happened with the Parquet files. So let's check the files again. View files, in fact sales, here. Let's check every quarter. So there is one secret here when checking the Parquet files. You always need to refresh. You always need to refresh. Otherwise you are seeing an old version, cached version of the file. So let's see again, view files, year 2000, quarter 1, see, we have two Parquet files. Both Parquet files have the same size, 57 megabytes. Both have the same size, but we have two. And we have two on every quarter. On every quarter we have two Parquet files. Why this? Why do we have two Parquet files? Because the entire Parquet file was duplicated. The Parquet file is read-only. There is no possibility to update a Parquet file, so the entire Parquet file was duplicated. In this example, I was updating all the records, but even if I were updating a single record, the entire Parquet file would be duplicated. Imagine the situation. You have a 1 gigabyte Parquet file. Imagine how many records this 1 gigabyte Parquet file will have. You make one update, one record update on this file, and the entire file is duplicated on the storage. That's how the Parquet files work, and that's how the Delta tables manage the updates. They duplicate the Parquet files. The log of the Delta tables, the log files on the Delta tables point to what Parquet files are the current Parquet files in use, the actual Parquet files, and which Parquet files are not in use anymore. The not in use anymore are called as unlinked Parquet files. The point is, how do we get rid of the unlinked Parquet files? Let's see this. But the first point we just noted is the consequence of making updates on a Delta table. So when you decide for making updates on a Delta table environment, keep this in mind. The consequence of your update on the Delta table environment. Now let's see how to get rid of those unlinked files. We have a statement called vacuum, which we can use to get rid of those files. We can use the vacuum to clean the unlinked files from the table. And here I'm putting retain 0 hours to make a 0 hours retention of the file. So it will immediately delete any unlinked file, doesn't matter how old the file is. However, we are talking about a big data environment, a lakehouse environment, which may be used by many other softwares. Many softwares may be using this environment. What happens if the vacuum tries to delete an unlinked file, while some software is making a time travel over the Delta table, for example, trying to read this file, or there are some uncommitted transactions? That will become a big problem. That's why the vacuum by default forbids you to make the retain 0 hours. You need to have a retention at a minimum of 168 hours. Minimum. So what I do here is not usually not recommended for production. I make this within 0 hours work, but this is not something recommended for production. What should you do in this case? Should you keep the retention, minimum retention of 168? Most of the time, yes. Unless you can be absolutely sure that at the time you will be running vacuum, there will be no concurrence on your environment. You are safe in relation to concurrence. In this case, you can safely go to 0 hours, for example. But in order to go to 0 hours, I need to enable a special Spark configuration. So this special Spark configuration, Spark Databricks Delta Retention Duration Check enabled, is what enables you to make the vacuum within 0 hours or any amount of hours lower than 168. But in fact, what you need to do is to disable the retention duration check, set it to false. Once this is set in a session to false, it will keep false on that session. If the session changes, you need to run this configuration again. So I executed the configuration and now I'm executing the vacuum. The vacuum is executed on the table. Let's take a look at the files right now. As always, we need to make a refresh. Then on fact sales, let's take a look on the files. For each quarter, the unlinked file was dropped and we kept only one single file, only the current file. Keep in mind, I mentioned before, this is a choice between manage ourselves or use the technology feature, in this case time travel, using time travel to manage the history for us. If we decide to use time travel to manage the history for us, we can't use vacuum. Vacuum is dropping exactly the time travel ability. We can't do time travel after using vacuum. You only use vacuum to optimize your environment if you decide to manage your history using a slowly changing dimension. That's it. We saw an example where I updated many records on the table. And I mentioned that even if I had updated one single record on each Parquet file, the Parquet file would have been duplicated. That's a fact. Now let's see a completely different example. Let's see an insert. What happens if I make an insert of a single record? Let's do it. The insert is done. The table is partitioned by quarter. This is month 10, October, so it's the fourth quarter. Only the fourth quarter was affected by this insert. Let's see how the fourth quarter was affected. Let's take a look at the files. We have two Parquet files, but they are not the same. They are not a copy from one another. The second Parquet file has only 10K. Why this happened? Well, there was no need to copy the file. They created one Parquet file to hold one record. We have one Parquet file to hold a single record. What I'm illustrating with this? I'm illustrating that if you send records to your data lake in very small chunks, your data lake will create small Parquet files and will face the small files problem affecting the performance of the environment. How do we solve this problem? Would vacuum solve this problem? Let me exemplify that and prove it. It's executed, so I'll make a refresh, fact sale, view files, the fourth quarter, and the vacuum did not. Why the vacuum doesn't solve this problem? Because both files are in use. Both files are actual records for this table. It's not an unlinked file, so it can't be removed by vacuum. So how do we solve this? To solve this, we need to run another statement called optimize. The optimize statement is capable to reorganize the files on our table, joining a small file in one single bigger file. And we need to be sure to ask the optimize to keep the v-order, a great optimization that our Parquet files use, that our delta table use. We need to keep the v-order. So let me execute the optimize. So the optimizer is executed. Let's check the result. One more time, let's refresh the page and let's see the files. We are talking about the last quarter. Oh, we had 2 files, now we have 3 files. How could this be? How could we increase the number of the files with the optimize? Mind the details of the file. We had 2 files. They were this second file and this third file. And now we have a new file included by the optimize. Mind the timestamp of the new file. What happened? The optimize joined the content of these 2 files in a new file. But the optimize doesn't drop old files. They are kept for time travel purpose. So the old files are kept. It's not part of the optimize task to drop old files. It just joins the old file inside a new file. So these 2 old files are what we call unlinked files. Now they are unlinked files. So if I want to get rid of these 2 unlinked files, I can execute vacuum. So a good maintenance approach for our tables is to always execute optimize first and then execute vacuum, because the optimize will generate unlinked files that the vacuum can remove. Let's execute the vacuum. It's executed. So now let's refresh files. Let's check how the files are. And there it is, the vacuum removed the unlinked file. Before, the vacuum execution was not capable to do that because they were not unlinked files. But after the optimize, they became unlinked files and the vacuum was capable to totally remove them, optimizing the environment. Today, you just discovered how critical are inserts, updates, and deletes in a delta table, the consequence it has to the files, and the kind of maintenance we need to keep on our delta tables. Next week we'll talk about how to make this maintenance schedule regular, schedule, and easier for all of us. Thank you very much for watching.